Bum 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 bum.
Tomatoes?
Hello, welcome to video 4. What is data table? A data table is basically a table of data inside of the engine. You could think of it kind of like a spreadsheet inside the engine. If we look at a data table that I've already created, we can see some familiar things. You'll see some columns, and you'll see some rows, and then you'll see some data inside of it. So like for example, for this one, we have an item ID where I have 1, we have a name of dagger, some damage value, a durability, and a rarity. And then on the left in the black is our row name, so the name of our row. Data tables can be created inside the engine, which I'll cover here shortly, or they can be created by bringing in data from an external application, such as a spreadsheet, and then you can easily create, manipulate, and update the data table inside the engine. That is covered in a separate How Do I video, so please look for that if you're interested in that. Now, creating a data table inside the engine is fairly simple. If you go into your miscellaneous data table, it's going to go ahead and ask you to pick a structure, and it's going to create the data table from that. By default, when this comes in, and if you haven't created any structures, you're just going to end up with your gameplay tag table row. These are 2 structures I created for example. We'll go ahead and create another one. So let's go ahead and go into blueprint structure. We'll call this our test data table struct. We'll open it up and we'll look at it. Now, if you haven't used structures before, please refer to the video about them. But as a recap, they're just simply a value and a key pair where we have the name of it and then what it holds. And they're really simple. So in this case, let's say we want this to be a part of like a student attendance sheet. So we could have something like student name, and then we could have something like seat, and then maybe I don't know, age, maybe something like birthday. Just a couple things we care about. I'll just go with that for now. So for birthday, we're going to do a date, time, and stuff like this is important. I'll show you here shortly. An age, we're going to go with integer. A seat, we're going to go with integer. And a name, we're going to go with string. And I'll go ahead and save this, and we'll close it out. Now I can make a data table from it by going to miscellaneous data table, pick the structure I want. So we'll go with the test data table and hit OK. And then we'll get a new data table. And we'll call this one our student data table. Now if we open it up, we'll find our data table editor. It's pretty simple like we saw before, except we don't have anything in here, so we have no data. You can remove rows with the X button or add rows with the add new row button. You can add multiple ones. So you can see here we added a bunch. It's going to go ahead and just simply keep naming them. Or if we want to get rid of them, we can delete them like this. We'll delete a couple, we'll go with this. Now your row name is where you're going to get the data from. You're going to use the node called the get row names node, which I will cover here in a little bit and cover separately, but this is your primary identifier. So you'd want to use this as some form of a key. In this case, let's go with new row name, and we're just going to use this as a student ID. So we're going to do 0, and then this one might be, well, we'll go something like 111, and then this will be 110. It would help if I actually hit enter. Seriously. Oh, because I already, why is this not cooperating? Okay, so my stuff's, there we go. Couldn't get to cooperate. I already have 110, so that really doesn't help. See how it says 110? That one's supposed to be 111. There we go. 110. In case you didn't notice, the row names are unique, so that is a key. You cannot rename a row to the same as another existing row. It's a unique key. And then we can put in some data. You know, maybe we have the name Matt, and he's in seat 2. His age is 90, and then the birth date would be, this is the date time, so you'd have to either know how to put it in here, or you would have to go ahead and fill it in later. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and keep it like this. And you'd fill out your data as you want it. Once it's saved out, you would want to pull it in and use the data. So let's say we want to populate a list of all of our students. Let's go ahead and pull up our example here, and we'll look at something I'm using now. What I'm using now is I'm using the get data table row node. So if we did get data table row, it's going to come out like this, and it's going to just ask you for which data table. So we could use like the student data table, and it's going to ask you the key. So we'd have all the keys populated here. The get data table node is going to return back a structure of the type that it found. So in this case, we could pull it out and we could break it, and it's going to give us back a structure of our test data. And we have all of our information inside of it. And then, of course, we can do whatever we want with it. So that's the way the data tables work in terms of getting out the data. There are two nodes for getting it. We have the get data table row node, and we have the get data table row names node. Both of these are covered separately in different videos. This is just a summary of what the get of the data table is and how we might use it. In terms of seeing it in use, let's say, for example, I have 1 chosen for my row name for my weapon, and I hit play, you're going to see it says dagger. Or if I chose long sword of doom and I hit play, you're going to see it says long sword of doom. That's because I'm grabbing that row from my weapon table. So if we grabbed our weapon table, which would be here, and we looked at it, long sword of doom is my key, and it gives me this information. And if we look here, you can see it's the name. That's what I'm printing out. Now, a couple things to note, and these are covered in the importing videos and things like that, are items you can add to the structure that are not easily pickable inside the engine will not show up inside of a data table. I say it like that because that's the easiest way for me to remember it. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's go ahead and pull up our student data table. And let's say we wanted to assign them a picture. Okay, well, we need to edit our structure. So let's close down these other ones, and let's grab our structure. So it's our test data table structure. And we'll just simply add a texture 2D. And this will be an image of, student image. It should be student picture, but we'll call student image. And we'll make it a texture 2D. We'll go ahead and save this out. And you'll notice here, it shows up fine in our structure. And you notice I can select any image. So we're good. Now if I go ahead and close this, and I go ahead and go back into here, our data table, you'll notice I now have my student image. And we could assign images inside of our data table. Okay, we're good. However, let's say we go in here and we want something else. Let's add in a actor. So let's say I want, for example, this to be the, item to spawn. Again, it's not good for a student, but this is something we want to test. So we're going to put an actor in here. We're going to put a reference to an actor inside of our structure. Now, if you'll notice, I can't set it as a default value. And if we go ahead and go back into our data table, you'll notice it says item to spawn, but we can't actually edit it. So that is something to note. Certain items will not show up inside of a data table because of the way they're created, because they're technically part of the engine, but not part of the engine at the same time. What I mentioned is things that show up in a list like this automatically will be fine. Things that don't show up in a list automatically because they have specific types like actors and objects and things like that will not show up. We could do, for example, a sound, and a sound will work fine. So we could do like a sound wave. Whoops, sound wave, dang it. Sound wave and hit save. And you know sound wave is here. We could do something like, and you'll notice we can also change it here, like I mentioned. I can even change this to like a sound cue and save it out. Sound cues can be selected, and sound cues will show up inside of here. You'll notice it has the spot for the item to spawn. It's just not going to be filled with anything because we can't set it. And that is something that is important to note. Data tables are data that is to be loaded, and they are basically read-only at runtime in the engine. You cannot store data into the data table at runtime. I can't use this as a database, for example. Once these values are set, they are set. The engine simply has get nodes. They do not have set nodes. You cannot set these at runtime. That's super important to understand. And that right there is going to wrap up the basics of our data table. So to summarize, data table needs a structure to hold its data. This is the data that will be inside of each row of our data table. The data table itself can be created under miscellaneous data table. It's going to ask you which structure to be the parent. Once you have a data table, you'll have all the information inside of it, each one being a row. Each row name is unique. They can be created with the add or delete. All the data is here for you to set it. Once you wish to get the information, you could use one of two nodes. You can either get the data table row or get data table row names. These are, of course, separate videos that will cover that information. You can bring information in from a comma space file, for example, from Excel or Google Docs, and allow you to easily edit and bring them in from an external source. That is covered in a separate How Do I video. And that's it. That is the basics of what is a data table.